Janice. I am the director of the Nation and professor in science. Background from University.
Each of the very so tell me a little bit
Yeah, for sure. So we're having this event on aging now in the Aging Society. And so we're going to be talking about some of the experiences that people have with ageism, and have a four-person panel. Myself, Dr. Elizabeth at the Harvard University. I'm up in the closet, who's representing the Association of Retired Persons, and Linda Kathryn, who is a well-known artist, vocalist, and singer, and so she's going to bring
what are some of the challenges
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of challenges in different areas of society. Challenges like in workplace, because you think about people are a bit ageist, thinking that older people don't have the same level of technology or they're not really investing in it. There's challenges in the grocery store. People take a little bit longer to get their card out. So there's a frustration and there's a high-tech society. So there's also internal again where we ourselves we get older and that's it's all about age and it's not about other aspects of it.
It's great about
Do a switch room?
Yeah.
Here. After hours.
I'm professor of geriatric medicine at Halifax University and Kathryn chair in Alzheimer's disease.
What's the message?
Sure, this event is all about ageism and how it impacts our lives. And there are different types of ageism. Ageism can arise from policy level, from the community, and from messages that are put out over other people, from interpersonal relationships, and even in our own thoughts about ourselves. So people are often self-deprecating and ageist comments and thought processes about themselves, and what we're trying to do is identify those and make collective impact.
People that are attending what you want them to learn from
The first to think about what ageism is, try to call it out when you see it, and see how we can impact this, because our population is aging, and that's all we have. And these are doing really well in supporting people living through healthy lives. And so we really just want to make sure that people have the best chances of independently and as often as we can actually.
That's great.
your presentation.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, and good evening. My name is Allison Black, and I'm a programming specialist here at the Central Library. On behalf of the Central Library, thank you so much for joining us for a conversation about aging well in the face of ageism. This program is held in partnership with the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging, with Mount St. Vincent University, and the Kathryn Allen Weldon Chair in Alzheimer's Research with Dalhousie University. I wish to begin today's event by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki. We live, work, and play on ancestral land that belongs to the Mi'kmaq people, the first peoples of Nova Scotia. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here this evening, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. And just a few housekeeping notes. Washrooms are located at the back of the hall, up the stairs on your left-hand side. We kindly ask you to please place your cell phones on silent. If you have any garbage, please dispose of them in the garbage recycling bins just over here. And fire exits are located at the back of the hall, through those doors, or through the vestibule on your right-hand side. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming our MC for this evening.
Hello, I'm Amy Thurlow. I'm a faculty member at Mount St. Vincent University in the Department of Communication Studies, and I'm a member of the board of the Nova Scotia Centre for Aging. And it is my pleasure to be your MC for this evening's program. Many of you here tonight or watching online are individuals who may be considered mature or seasoned or older adults. In other words, you have longer life experience and rich insights on age and aging. Some of you may be retired and pursuing new interests and adventures, while others of you are engaged in the labor force. Many of you are volunteering your time and talents in support of essential community organizations and probably also helping with grandchildren or providing care to family members. All to say, older adults make important contributions to our families and communities, yet unfortunately don't always get recognized or valued for what they do. Not recognizing that older adults are essential and important members of society is what fuels stereotypes and negative attitudes about older adults and, in other words, ageism. Ageism is a form of discrimination based on one's age that can affect people across the lifespan, but predominantly affects older adults. Ageism is widespread in our society, and it is the topic of tonight's conversation because ageism can impact our ability to age well. More of which we will hear this evening, but before that, a few other matters about tonight's event. Early October is a time with several recognition days and weeks specifically to celebrate and honor older adults. What a better way to start addressing ageism. Tonight's event is being presented to mark October 1st, which annually was the International Day of Older Persons declared by United Nations and Canada's National Seniors Day. Each year, Nova Scotia hosts Seniors Week, and this year it runs from October 2nd till 9th. For information on information sessions, the Nova Scotia Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care is presenting, go to novascotia.ca/seniorsweek for more details on that. And finally, the Canadian Coalition Against Ageism is leading a week-long national campaign of awareness initiatives from October 1st to 9th. To view the activities or to become a member, you can visit www.ccageism, faceofageism.ca. Now, I would also like to acknowledge the organizations which are partnering to make this event possible this evening. They include the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging, the Kathryn Allen Weldon Chair in Alzheimer's Research, and Halifax Public Libraries. Halifax Public Libraries and other public libraries serve as a community hub in many communities across Nova Scotia. They are a place of socialization, learning, and engagement for older Nova Scotians through hosting community events, offering library programming, and volunteer opportunities. Tonight, for those present, our friends here at the Halifax Central Library have made available 2 specific resources that may be beneficial to the audience. Information on one-on-one technology sessions and seniors' mental health and memory kits in collaboration with Alzheimer's Society. They also have made several other resources available, and those are on the resource table just over here to my left. We also have some conference bags from the Center for Aging, all free for the taking. So please take a look at the resource table before you leave. Our main financial support for this event has been provided by the Dr. F.R. McKinnon Endowment Fund, a fund that supports the mission and mandate of the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging. Our program this evening will involve a conversation amongst the individuals on the stage for 60 minutes or so. This will be followed by some time for comments and discussion with our audience here at the library and our online participants. We will have a couple of individuals in the audience with microphones. For those online, you are invited to email your comments or questions to nsca@msvu.ca, and they will be incorporated into the discussion here as appropriate. At about 8 p.m., we'll wrap up the formal part of the evening and the live stream will conclude. Those in attendance are welcome to stay on for refreshments and some further chat until 8:30. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator and speakers for our events. Our moderator this evening, a familiar voice to many, is Jean Laroche. Jean Laroche retired this year after almost 40 years with the CBC in Ottawa, Montreal, Whitehorse, and Halifax. He spent 30 of those years in the Nova Scotia legislature covering provincial politics and the actions of 8 governments. He is a proud Dartmouthian, and he and his wife, Kathryn, enjoy camping, hiking, and most recently, learning to line dance. I'll just let that sink in as we... Jean has the task of managing a spirited group of women this evening, and they include Donalda McIsaac, a passionate advocate for issues affecting older adults and volunteers with several organizations. She is a member of the board of directors of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, or CARP, Nova Scotia, and she is also on CARP's Health Committee. She's also a member of the West Bedford Transitional Health Quality and Safety Advisory Committee, a board member on the National Patient Advisor Network, and she is also involved with the Maritimes War Support Unit. Linda Carberry is former president of the Nova Scotia Mass Choir and has received several awards for her musical excellence, including the East Coast Music Award for Best Jazz Artist and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the African Nova Scotian Music Association. She continues to perform, maybe here tonight, you never know, and helps foster Nova Scotia's artistic hub. She is active in her community with Compass Nova Scotia and the Community North Co-op. When not engaged in her community work and music, she is getting used to the smaller digs that she and her husband recently moved into after having lived in a large family home for 46 years. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to check out the TED Talk she did for the Center's TEDx Aging Well event several years ago, where she combined her powerful voice with a powerful message about aging well. Dr. Melissa Andrew is professor of medicine with Dalhousie University and a geriatrician at the QE2 Health Sciences Center in Halifax. In addition to many other portfolios, she is a board member of the Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia and a member of Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization. Her research areas include frailty, social vulnerability, vaccinology, and cognitive impairment. Most recently, she assumed the Kathryn Allen Weldon Chair in Alzheimer's Research, a portfolio that enables her to advance her research. But last but not least, Dr. Janice Keith is professor and chair of the Department of Aging and Family Science at Mount St. Vincent University. She holds the Lena Isabel Jodrey Chair in Gerontology and is director of the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging. Her research expertise centers on family-friend caregivers, continuing care policies, dementia care, rural aging, and continuing care human resources. She has led several multidisciplinary tri-council and government-funded projects and sits on a number of provincial, national, and international committee and boards. Dr. Keith teaches courses in social policy and aging at the Mount and provides mentorship and supervision to a number of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. So again, for the next 60 minutes or so, we will hear different perspectives and insights on aging well in the face of ageism, which will be followed by some time for comments and discussion with our audience here at the library and our online participants. Just a reminder, online participants, you can email your comments or questions to nsca@msvu.ca. And now I'll hand it over to our moderator, Jean Larache.
Thanks, Amy. And I want, on behalf of the panel, I want to welcome you here and thank you very much for coming out, or if you're online, thanks for clicking. Past Colbert and whatever else is available to you. As Amy said, we'll be speaking amongst ourselves for about an hour or so. But think of questions, think of if you hear something up here that you go, well, I'd like to challenge that. Or if you want to share an experience with us and with the wider audience, that would be great too. All right, so buckle up. Let's give it a go. All right. First, let's start by each one of you then telling us briefly what your connection or interest is with this topic. I'll start with you, Janice.
Sure. So at the Nova Scotia Centre on Aging, our mission is improving the quality of life of older people and their families. And so one of the downsides to having a quality of life is when you experience some discrimination around aging. So I think it's part of our mission to really put ageism in the front, to challenge some of the assumptions that people and even ourselves make as we get older. And we've done a number of different research projects, particularly looking at older workers. So how are older workers treated in the workplace? I can tell you already, the number of times people ask me, when are you retiring anyway? Is really interesting, because there's an assumption that, man, you're getting old, you should retire. And so that's just, it's such an interesting subversive kind of approach that I think we want to challenge here. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, more of an academic, but also recognizing, even in my own family and my own community, that sometimes, it's not the way we think or treat older people is really not fair.
Thank you very much. I share that experience with you because I think almost every premier I covered wanted to know when I was planning to retire. Sooner the better. Melissa?
Yeah, sure, thanks. I guess I'll come at it from a clinical lens, from working with people navigating aging, and especially I would say with cognitive impairment and dementia, because it has so much, there's a whole other layer of this intersectionality that will come up. And if we think about ageism, that can, where does ageism come up? So there's different levels, right? There's the societal views of, do we value older people? How do we promote the well-being of older people and have policies that support them? There's interpersonal, sort of just the relationships that we'd have with other people. And then there's the ageist kind of comments that we bring ourselves down. And there's a lot of, it's sometimes said in jest, but like the senior moment comments, the things about, I'm getting too old for this, etc. But when we think about somebody who's living with some cognitive impairment or dementia, like we really need to address all of those. And there's a lot of stigma that can come in, and people get excluded. And so what I will try to do with people that I see in clinical settings is to really promote this idea that being self-actualized, having this sense of mastery, like people who are engaging in activities and things that are meaningful to them, is going to be beneficial for their health, whatever stage of frailty or cognitive abilities that they might have. And so for me, it's really important to get that message out. And I would challenge you to go through any single day in any of your lives and not encounter something that's ageist.
All right, so
Hopefully we'll get that better by the end.
Yep. We've had the clinical view, we've had the academic view. Let's go where the rubber hits the road, Linda.
The reason why I'm here is because I've always been intrigued, interested, and amazed at how some people link together the ages of older women in particular and what we should and should not be doing. Okay? And I will add that I have learned a lot from my close to 102 late mother. And I just want to give you one example. I went to visit her one afternoon up at Northwood Manor, and she was in her 90s at the time, and she was just a rocking in the chair to country and western music. And I said, Mom, when did you start listening to country and western music? She got up from the chair, put her hands on her hip, and said, a change is as good as a rest. And I haven't been the same since. And so, and when I go to church now, I sit in a different spot. You know how people go and sit in the same section all the time? So that's what she taught me. And that's the end of my story right now.
All right, Linda. Donelda, as an advocacy organization for and about older Nova Scotians, I think your perspective or your interest is almost kind of out there, but what are your thoughts?
Well, for me, it's very important that we recognize that older people, I don't like senior. I need to tell you, because once you have the word senior, that's it. You were never anything else before that. So I really like to say older persons. But, there's a lot of older people in the community that are isolated as well because they fear the ageism and they just become more isolated. And so I'm very concerned about that. We also have a lot of older adults looking after their loved ones and their caregivers in community. And, we get a pat on the shoulder, great job. But that's an awesome responsibility to have. And, we need to do good. And I'm really glad we're having this conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation because it can make you uncomfortable, but we need to have this conversation around ageism.
And Amy touched on it earlier in the introduction. We are having this conversation because ageism does exist. And as you say, it is something we should talk about like the other isms. But the term ageism can really be off-putting to some people, not well understood. Can you share some examples of what ageism looks like? You want to start, Donelda?
Oh, that's a good one. Are you ever going to dye your hair?
I beg your pardon?
I know. Thank you. But, or it's just that fact of you just are made to feel that you go somewhere and you're just made to feel that you're too old to do this. Or it's interesting because I have the attitude of I'm just me. And so I just sort of walk in the room and I'm just me. But lately, if you ask me my age, I want to know why. Because all of a sudden, it's not my qualifications. it's my age. And you feel it inside, and it doesn't leave you feeling very good.
Yeah, I think that's a really great comment, and how we. I almost have the opposite effect because I'll say, "Look, I'm 62. What is your problem?" Because people will say, "Oh, you know, when you get to be over 60," I'm like, "Over 60? What are you talking about? I'm over 60."
Right.
And so I think sometimes we need to challenge people. We need to say, "What?" Just as you are. Why are you asking me that? Who cares how old I am? Unless it's to get, OAS or something like that. We don't want to miss out on those things. But I do think age is so relative, and ageism isn't only older people. We are ageist against young people too. I mean, people follow young people around in the grocery store thinking they're going to steal something. Like, that's also ageism, right? So I think calling out it as an ism, as a discrimination, I think is really important in a nice way.
Linda?
I don't know what ageism looks like, but I got a funny feeling how it feels. And yeah, how it feels. And so I've come to the conclusion now. I mean, no, I've made a decision lately when people are curious about how old I am. See, I'm always wondering, what is it? Why do you want to know? Is there something I'm doing that you think I shouldn't be doing at my age? Like, what's the problem? Like, where has it been written that I shouldn't be doing this now or something? So when somebody says something like, "Oh, Linda, are you are you are you about 65? Or are you around 65 or so?" I said, "Yeah, something like that," and I leave it at that. Although they're way off, but they don't need to know. What do they need to know for? What is it that they're trying to determine? But I'm so glad that I'm very, very much like my mother, because she really didn't really care. She had things to do, she did it. For example, when her and Dad were married, Dad wasn't into music, but she liked music. So if there was a band playing somewhere, and she's a married woman in her 40s and 50s and 60s, and she wanted to go to the club to see them, she'd get all dressed and go there and sit by herself and go watch the group, and don't care how it looked by anybody else. And I really like that about her, and I'm very much like her, I must say. And I'm so glad, because it gives me a sense of freedom. I don't think there's any books written, is there, saying that I should be doing this, I should be doing that, or, "Oh, dear heavens, you shouldn't be doing this anymore at this age, Linda." I don't think so. If there is, keep it to yourself.
Yeah. Melissa?
Or what you should wear too. I think that's the other thing.
That's
what
a
you should,
big one. Yeah.
Melissa?
Great. Yeah, I think this is so interesting that it comes down to values and what we value on all those different levels of like the society's values, the individual relationships valuing. And another word that comes up actually just as we're talking about this is paternalism too. Like in healthcare, there's quite a lot of paternalism that sneaks in and informs what we offer to older people as options, how we engage, like I often meet people who say, I wish when I went to the doctor that they would talk to me and not my daughter. Like we need to engage people and see what they want and not just be listening to, somebody else that we think is speaking for them. I mean, that also comes to different things like the opportunity to participate in research studies. If people want to, we should be trying to design our studies to optimally include the people that we actually need to be designing treatments for. So like, for example, the vaccine world that I do a lot of work in, if we exclude older people from the early stages of vaccine studies, even if they might want to participate and we have ways that we could allow them to participate, then how do we know that the vaccines that we're designing are going to work for older people? And you get all the way along the line with before you start giving them to older people without having, engaged them in research. So it's like the ageism can be seen, if you look for it, at every single step in the process, from like developing treatments, medications, processes of care, all the way to implementing them.
And Melissa, given your expertise when it comes to dementia, are there specific ways that ageism is experienced differently for those who are living with dementia?
I would imagine so. In my experience, this is what I've seen. And actually, one resource that I think is really important to think about when getting back to that paternalism is to allow and to support people to be as active as they want in their own lives, to self operationalize however they want to be. And the Alzheimer Society of Canada has done really great work in this, working with people with lived experience, and they have a Charter of Rights for people living with dementia that I'd encourage you to check out, because it really is a lot about, it's like nothing about us without us. It lays out a lot of practical steps about like how we as a society and as like healthcare and other institutions can better engage with people living with dementia.
I just want to jump in and say, in terms of paternalism, one of the worst, well, in my experience, is when adult children feel that they know best about what should happen. And I remember, actually, it was after church one day, and someone came up to me, this is a number of years ago, and said, I'm really wanting to know my mom. I think I have to think about my mom and not, nursing home care. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't realize your mom was not doing so well. And she's like, no, she's on a bus trip to Boston, but I need to know when I should put her in a nursing home. Well, I was just like, whoa, honey, like you're not putting anybody anywhere. They're not an object. They're a person. That's your mother. Like you have a relationship. And don't get on me about parenting your parent. They are not your parent, those children of yours. And they'll always be your children. And so I just think it's really important that we have those kind of, as Danelda says, those awkward conversations with our children about, who's driving the bus, really? Who is driving the bus here? And have the conversations before we may not be able to have the conversations cognitively. Not to say that's necessarily going to happen, but let's get it in writing so they can't, put us anywhere that we don't want to go.
Now, there are statistics about ageism, but people debate about just how accurate some of those figures are. In your experience or day-to-day work or personal lives, how prevalent do you think ageism actually is? I'm going to start with you, Danelda, because I know CARP has done a survey which included a question about ageism, right?
Yeah, we did. As you know, with CARP, it's health, around the health of seniors, mental, physical, emotional, is very important. And so there was a survey done, and one of the questions in the survey, we sent that survey out to 10,000 people, members of CARP, and the question was, have you ever at any time felt that ageism was a barrier to you receiving health care? We knew that this was an issue, but we really were taken back that almost 80% of the respondents, and we got 1,400 back so far, we're still doing this survey, said yes, at some time or another they have felt in the system that ageism impacted their health care.
Melissa, does that figure surprise you?
No, not at all. Unfortunately,
No.
yeah. Our systems, you could actually think about this. So we have a population that's aging, which is a good thing, because it means we're doing well at lengthening lives and supporting people through the lifespan. But we do know that as people get to older ages, they have different healthcare needs, right? So they may have a number of different health conditions that have added up. And the treatment of each one of those needs to be done in the context of all the other things, right? So we can't design our healthcare system to deal really well with the one thing at a time, because, people have 10 things at a time. But you could argue that because we continue to design our healthcare system for one thing at a time, that in itself is ageist. So, every time you walk into a hospital, there it is. It's an ageist institution, but we need to try to unpack and ameliorate that.
As a reporter, I know one of the rules is always ask a question you know the answer to. And this question, I kind of figure I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are the perceptions of aging different based on sex or cultural background? Who wants to handle that one first? Danelda, go.
Oh, 100%. Definitely. For example, when I asked you if you were going to dye your hair, you responded differently. Like, it was like, how dare you ask me that question? Where women are asked those questions all the time. And I think, especially in workplaces, women are made to feel more inferior as they get older. You have to look a certain way. You have to wear your clothes a certain way. You have to have makeup a certain way, whereas, men can just sort of roll in sometimes.
We age gracefully,
That's
distinguished, those
That's-
kind of adjectives.
That's it. That's the one.
In your own mind, Aileen.
But yeah, it really is. It impacts. It really impacts on how you feel about yourself culturally. And it doesn't matter if you're a female, male. It has an impact. So I think what we need to do is stop looking at, this is just me, stop looking at male, female culture. Stop looking at all this stuff. What is the impact on the individual, regardless of who they are and where they come from? What's the impact of ageism on that person?
Janice, you're champing at the bit. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just think it's such an interesting question just because of what you said. Like, I remember, yes, when I was a young person, younger, I will say, I was told by someone that perhaps I should dye my hair because my son would, on the playground, I might be misconstrued for his grandmother. It's like, whoa, I'm in an aging program. How do you say that to me? So I like your point about, the stereotype that men are distinguished, women are, need to do the facelifts and the eye lifts and the whatever other lifts we need to do to meet whatever we're supposed to look like. It is inherent, and I don't necessarily experience this, but I would suspect that when you combine ageism, it can get combined with other isms, right? So racism, homophobia, like all of these things can sort of intersect and collide to make it the experience at the individual level, I wonder, would be even more difficult.
Linda?
I remember my father said to me one time, he said, "Girl, I can be all drunked up and laying in the gutter on Saturday night and get back up Sunday morning and go to church. And everybody will say, 'How you doing, Mr. Gordon? How you doing?' And he said, 'You try it and see how they'll respond to you.' And I knew exactly what that said a lot to me. And he knew exactly what he was talking about, the difference, And I said, wow.
Melissa?
Sure, yeah, very interesting question. So there is this intersectionality of all of people's identities and their social position, as they might call it, that would be experienced differently. So it's hard to say, even looking at it as a binary, it'd be much more complex than that. But certainly in aging medicine, we see how people age differently. So in general, like women would tend to live longer than men, but obviously not always, and is much more complex than that. But then experience frailty differently and experienced cognition and dementia differently too. And one thing that I guess we are doing better at in the research field is intentionally looking at that and examining it and making sure that more of our research is inclusive and looks at the experiences of people in different gender and sex groups.
And is there any attempt within the research to do culturally specific research, to be able to say in Indigenous communities, we talk a lot about elders and the position that they hold within their community. less so maybe in other communities?
For sure. I mean, I think that our center hasn't done a lot of research with Indigenous groups, but we work with people who are writing this edited book about including older people in the development of research. So calling it essential voices, that if you're going to have kind of like nothing with them without them, if you're going to have authentic relationships with advisors who are older and they're supporting your research program, you need to listen to what they are telling you about their experience. And part of that edited book is to bring in a community researcher who has worked with the Muslim community in Edmonton. And another one is they're developing a toolkit for different persons with dementia who come from different cultural backgrounds, so that we begin to understand a little bit better about the experiences of people as they are on their dementia journey. I think that's really important. It's not, I think there are other scholars that are more, they're more knowledgeable about that than I am, but I think it's a really important area that we need to go into.
And is it different in Nova Scotia than it is in other places, in other parts of the country, do you think?
So my research is primarily, right now, we're doing a lot of work in staffing and long-term care. And so what we're finding is, so Alberta, who's our partner on this project, the proportion of the people, we call them CCAs, continuing care assistants, the frontline personal care workers in nursing homes, they are about 85 to 90% newcomers. So people from the Philippines or from India, Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. We're just moving along that pathway now. And so even for our research, trying to understand the experiences of the workers from that point of view in terms of their own mental health, in terms of the work environment in which they are providing care to residents, I think has provided some insight. So I know we have a postdoc here and another master's student that are working in this area. So it's really important because they also send a lot of money back to their home country as well. So not quite the actual older persons, but in another sort of lens into understanding care.
And part of that, I think, is that there, in certain parts of the world, there is much more a caring culture towards folks who are older than there are in North America, where, like as you said earlier, when do I put mom into the home, as opposed to how are we going to care for mom or dad? Any thoughts?
Well, just back to the research, we really need to listen to people's own voices. And so there has been much more move toward having people embedded within the research teams themselves who have the lived experience and who are older adults themselves, who are from different communities. If we're going to be doing research with a community, have to make sure to develop the research project with them so it answers the right questions. Because I've been on research teams where the team is like, oh, well, this is great. Here's the questions we're going to address. And then the person sits there and is like, that's a stupid question. You shouldn't ask it that way. Here's what matters to our community. So yeah, definitely it's important.
Linda?
I'm from a large family. It was a family of 9, and I'm in the middle. And as a young person, I always asked a lot of questions to the older folks, just the way I was, because I always felt that they knew a whole lot more than we did as young people. And I know a lot of young people, they think sometimes they know everything. We went through that phase too. But eventually I came to realize that they know a whole lot more than I do. And I would ask a lot of questions. We were allowed to ask questions in the family. And sometimes the answers weren't what we wanted to hear, but, And if we didn't ask questions, it was like, okay, little girl, you have a little seat there. We have to have a little talk. But what, Mom? you know that little boy you're seeing out there? No, he's just my friend. And then we get into, the conversation. But that's how it would go. Very simple like that. But I always, when I look back and I think, back in the day when people had large families, they had to be organized. They had to know what they're doing. And I figured, well, if they know what they're doing, I need to learn a little something, something from them. So I need to ask questions. And they didn't mind you asking questions. And they were going to tell you the truth, too. You may not want to hear what the truth was.
Do you think that's still true today, though?
Oh, I think so. Because I find I'm very shocked with this generation with some of the questions that my grandson's asking me. I said, "Oh, you don't know that answer, eh? Interesting," because I'm thinking. But yeah, I think, and I think that's a real good thing. If we could keep that going, having younger people ask the older people questions because they've been here, they've had experiences, and take a listen. We may learn a little something from our older folks. And now I'm one of the older folks. And I'm just saying.
And do you think that would go a long way to kind of getting to tackling the problem of ageism if there were a lot more conversations intergenerationally?
I think so. I mean, I think the intergenerational aspect of it, we keep people apart, and I think it's getting to know individuals that really gives a different perspective. I teach intro to aging. So this is students, a lot of them coming right out of high school. They land in my class and I'm going on about older people and trying to help them understand, because I think sometimes, they have grandparents, et cetera, but they don't always understand the difference, like the diversity within the group. Right? So we lump people together like 65 and older or 75 and older, but those 75-year-olds, they've had a heck of a lot of different experiences. And so that shapes who they are, as Donelda was saying, like ask about the individual too. And I think that's a really important aspect that are having that more intergenerational contact helps people to not be afraid, and be respectful. Like I make them go out and find all those crazy cards that are ageist. Do you know how many ageist cards there are out there for birthdays, etc.? I mean, they're everywhere. They're just pervasive. And Melissa, you can talk about your recent study that, around the U.S. election and how older people were portrayed. Like this idea gets ingrained in these guys' heads, right? Because they see it on media or in social media and Twitter and, Facebook or wherever. And of course, young people don't use Facebook anymore, apparently. I'm aging myself. Anyway, I know that there's a really interesting research that you guys have just published in the Gerontologist. So.
Yeah, it's timely. This paper just came out last week about ageism on Twitter during the U.S. election. And so that, of course, that's got its own issues, the U.S. election, but just like analyzing the content of people's tweets and how they feel quite empowered to say the most terrible ageist things,
Hey,
and
boomer.
dehumanizing, and so much stigma. And it actually got to the point, it was coming up so much, like people would say like Dementia Joe was a terrible thing that came up a lot. And I remember typing into my word processor and it was doing the AI predictive thing. And I wrote the word dementia in a paper or something and Joe comes up afterwards. I'm like, oh my gosh, like it really is pervasive. And so what we were hoping to do in the course of that study was to just bring up some awareness of how, some of the hate and vitriol that is happening on Twitter is actually feeding this ageism, which in itself is not a good thing.
Donelda, in your organization, do you find that people lump everybody into kind of one big mass?
Yes, definitely into one big mass. And excuse me, It's challenging because, you know, I'll tell you one thing, language is very important around how we see ourselves. And so I say senior long-term care.
Right.
So all you see is, okay, every senior is going to long-term care. So just that in itself, CARP is trying to change the attitude around how you see yourself. And you know, it's important that people actually start taking charge of how we actually see ourselves, and that we stop allowing ourselves to be lumped together in something. No, I'm not.
And anyone who's received a government pamphlet about aging or some seniors grant or whatever, what is the picture they show?
They show seniors and older senior, you know, and you always see seniors ready to go either in a, you know, a long-term care facility, or they're wrapped in a blanket. Nobody ever sees you dressed and ready to go out or see a positive picture. So we portray older people in a negative way. Perfect example. Older people, we are the problem with the healthcare system. I mean, I was little and I was still hearing how older people are going to be the problem of the healthcare system. So sooner or later, you have to figure out it's not the older people that's the problem with the healthcare system.
And it's also, especially during COVID,
Oh.
there was such a stigma attached to, you know, to older people that they weren't focusing initially on supporting those people in long-term care. You know, and I have this little show I go around and talk to different groups on, and I mean we have highlighted some of the sort of like Melissa's research, some of the headlines. You know, this Texan governor said older people should. He said the elderly, which I hate. That's just just off that word. The elderly should be prepared to die, volunteer to die, so that younger people could live. It was in the paper. It was in a paper in the U.S. It's horrible. Like, it's just, anyway. That's an extreme, but
I have the same pet peeve over elderly, because I remember I was helping a younger colleague write a story, and they were talking about an elderly man had been hit in a crosswalk. And I said, well, how old was he? And he said, well, 62. And I looked at him and I went, I'm 62. This was a few years ago, but anyway, yeah, I'm 62. Am I elderly? Oh, no, not you. I didn't mean you. So language is important.
So that's why I call myself a seenager.
All right, we've talked a little bit about what ageism is, what it looks like, and I'm sure everyone would agree that we need to do something about it. All right, what?
Why me?
Because you made eye contact.
I should stop looking at him. I got to turn this way. What are we going to do about it? I think, personally, just some subtle calling out of people when when they make that comment, as we need younger people who have good ideas and innovation. We need them on our committee. Well, hello. Older people might have good ideas too. And even just to gently say, well, what does age have to do with it? Isn't it about what we're thinking, about exploring different things? So that sort of just pausing to reflect on when we do that internal ageist kind of speak to each other, when we limit who we are because somebody thinks we shouldn't wear that, or we shouldn't be that, or we shouldn't do that, right?
Should act our age.
Should act your age. What's that anyway?
I think it's really important that we have numerous conversations with younger people and older people together. I think that's so important. I think we need to do a lot of that. And we can both benefit, the older people and the younger people, whoever they may be.
Melissa?
Yes, I agree with checking it at our individual and interpersonal levels. And I'll also add then the systems change, because we've hinted a bit and we've talked about how, there's this message about the silver tsunami and like the older adults are going to sink the healthcare system and all this stuff. Well, we can flip that and say, it's not the older adults' fault that we didn't design our healthcare system to meet their needs, and we need to get on it and improve it. And if we don't listen, then we won't get too far with that. So really then it becomes about including older adults' lived experience voices in our research and our decision making, and including them at the decision making tables too.
Donelda?
Respect. We need to learn how to respect one another, or respect older people especially. Because older people, we have this thing, we have these pet phrases that we throw around. Person-centered. We also throw around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, you're excluding older adults. So when you exclude them, that separates them. So your diversity, equity, and inclusion doesn't play the role that it's supposed to play.
So other than here, where are we having these conversations? Where should we have those conversations, Janet?
Well, I think we need to have them both in our families, but I think I take Melissa's point. We need to really examine our policies, our institutions, and the way we've organized them so that we're not having those intergenerational conversations. So taking a hard look at how we organize stuff, right? Do we put senior centers and childcare centers together? Do we separate them out so they're isolated? Do we integrate people into living arrangements that have both a range of different age groups? Like we knew, I went into aging because in 1981, or maybe it was 82, I did a paper which looked at the demographics. I was in second year university and I went, oh my God, it's going to go from 8% to 25%. There's got to be a job for me there. There's got to be a job for me there. But you know what? The systems, as Melissa was saying, like around the healthcare, that hasn't changed enough to really address that increased population. And the other thing is, my God, they make it as if it's older people's fault that they got older.
They lived long enough.
They live long enough and they need health care. It's your fault. There's a blame game going on there that I think we need to call out. That's all I'm saying.
I would like to add, my husband and I just recently downsized, and we moved into a co-op, and I'm really big on diversity. Now, let me tell you what the criteria was. Long-term North End members, seniors, young families, Indigenous populations, African Nova Scotians, and disabled members. And I said to myself, you know what? That's how we should be living anyway, so that we can know and learn more about each other. And it's a wonderful community. Like it's, you meet all the different kids and you hear children laughing, and you just learn so much when you're with other people that aren't like you. And I think it's amazing. And I thought, what a great concept. And we applied right away and we got in because we fit just about, my husband and I fit just about all of the criteria. We really did. So I was really, really, really happy.
Melissa, when I was covering politics for a couple of years, they used to, successive governments have siloed seniors care or the Department of Seniors. It was always kind of separate from healthcare. Is that helpful or not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess it would depend on how it was operationalized. Like, if it's bringing attention to and bringing an advocate to all these decision-making tables who has that lens, then maybe it's beneficial. But then it does run the risk, just as public health runs the risk of having, so little resource compared to the big monster that is acute care that takes all of the funding and the resources. So that would be the concern, and then it would further other. So in some ways, maybe cross-cutting that lens rather than having the different silos might be a more constructive way to go.
And you talked about a little bit about internal ageism. How do you check yourself, or do you? Is that the answer? Is checking yourself?
It is, I think. It's calling out yourself or your partner or, a child or whomever about, well, why do you think that way? It's just, I'm also from a family of 9. And, I'm the second youngest. So I'm always, I have an older siblings. And so it's just like, so what if you're this age? You're the fittest of all of us in this family. And so, there's this sense of because you're a certain age, certain things should happen, and it doesn't have to happen. So it's calling that out, and it's calling out the people in your circle, I guess, in a nice way to say, but why do you think that way? Because really, you're healthier than I am. You walk 5 kilometers a day. Like, it's just those little moments, I think. But the other thing I don't know, and maybe we're going to talk about it, is just the diversity within that older population. And anyway, I won't go there now.
No, go ahead. No.
Well, I was just thinking, like, we can have these conversations, but then people's resources, be they like social resources or economic resources, can really affect their experience of aging well, right? So if you live in a rural community, there's no sidewalks, there's no walking at night, or even during the day, the roads are so narrow. How do you get into that exercise mode? Or transportation becomes a problem. So that aging well can be really affect, a barrier, I guess. And then there's the whole economic. It's great to if you have pensions. In my intro class, I explained to the students if it was. So my mom was mostly at home. She lived till she was 89, and she had 9 kids. So she had a little attachment to the labor force, but no pension, like just a little bit of CPP. And so she mainly was old age security and guaranteed income supplement. So I said, when you add those two together, do you know how much money the older people get? And they're like, no idea in the world. I said, I don't know. It's around $1,900 a month. Oh my God, nobody can live in that. Rent is more than that. And so they're just this idea that they have no idea how, and there's so much diversity, right? And so we can talk about ageism and whatever, but the experiences of the individual, again, is going to be affected by their economic circumstances, their locale where they live, how much family and friends are around them, whether they're married or not, whether they have children or not, whether they're, have been discriminated throughout their life because they're homosexual. Like, there's so much diversity, way more, I think.
Go ahead,
And I
Danelle.
think, despite the whole conversation that we're having here, this puts it in a nutshell. Exactly. It's looking at the reality of it and the impact that ageism is having on the older population. And the loneliness, the isolation, but Janice hit onto it. It's all those other dynamics into it. So that's what makes the conversation uncomfortable and difficult, because you have to address almost each one of those issues by itself, because each one of them are complex.
See, I'm sorry.
So go ahead, Linda.
Just as a human being, I've always felt that each and every one of us has a responsibility for the well-being of the human race. I've always felt that. And I know I have some friends who are older, who are beginning to feel a little isolated and stuff. And I had a conversation last night and she said, well, Linda, you know, I get a lot of enjoyment out of music. And I said, by George, why don't you just join a choir? And I put a little bug in her head because I'm already in a choir and I do some solo work, but I'm joining another choir starting Thursday, a choir that doesn't perform. They get together at 10:30 in the morning on Thursday and they sing. And I can't think of too much of anything else that's uplifting. And I remember our choir director saying to us one time from LA, he said, if you can talk, you can sing. I'm just not saying how well. That's what he said. And you know, I just think we have a responsibility as a human being, in my opinion, to support each other. The young and the old and the in-between. It shouldn't matter, because we all have something to offer each other. I've always felt that way, even as a child. And I remember saying to my mother one time, because we had 9 children, and I'm in the middle. And, you know, they didn't have much in the way of birth control and stuff like that, right? I said, Mom, if you could have done anything about it, would I be here? Nope. At least she was being truthful. You know, she was saying, no, Linda, I wouldn't have had so many children if I was able to do something about it. And I thanked her for that because she was being truthful. And you can't tell me that families that had 12, 13, 14, 15 kids planned that. I'm just saying. And I just think it's important that we talk to each other. And, you know, we can learn so much. And a lot of times, you know, we have older people who think they can't learn nothing from the youngins. And some of the youngins thinking they can't learn nothing from the older people. They don't know nothing. It's not true. It's not true. Take a little time and hang out with them. You'd be surprised how much you can learn.
Melissa, this notion of aging well, how are we doing?
Yeah, well, there would be, just like back to what Janice was talking about, a really broad range of how well people age. And, you know, I guess if we're going to find out how well we're doing, we need to ask the people themselves, you know, how do they feel about the way that their life is going? And strive to do better. I was listening to a podcast recently, and they framed ageism in a really interesting way. They said it's the ism that pits us against our future selves. It's like, wow, when you think about it that way, like you could have empathy for, if you can envision yourself in the future, maybe if you're a young person who has ageist attitudes, maybe try to envision yourself in the future, try to, you know, see what, you know, empathize with that future self and see what you would want then. And you can be pretty sure you wouldn't want somebody else to be making all your decisions and telling you where to go and not making the communities accessible. Because that's another thing that can help support people in aging well, is this idea of age-friendly communities, which are things like accessibility and transit and you know, green spaces and benches to sit down on. And if you think about that, it's not only beneficial for people who are older, it's beneficial for everybody. It really just lifts the whole community in a really positive way.
Janice, do you have any sense of where Canada is in the world in terms of doing that kind of stuff? Because it seems like there's innovative stuff always happening somewhere else. And
Always.
I wish we had that.
Well, we actually have in Canada age-friendly communities. I think Melissa was talking about Canada was trying to be a leader in that area. It was a large. It was age-friendly cities, but the Canadian, there was a Margie Gillis who is now at the International Longevity Center and is part of that coalition against ageism and is fighting for the UN to really recognize ageism as a challenge. We had her at the Mount in June to give another public talk and just a chat about what the kind of work that she was doing. But this age-friendly communities that Melissa, she changed it from just cities, that we have to think about rural and remote communities also being age friendly, and everything from health and social services to how we communicate with each other. Like, how many times do we hear press 1, press 2, and then boom, you're cut off. So how do we make all of those systems, transportation, the benches that when you get tired you can sit down? It also helps for a mother with a small child, right? That's walking around. It benefits everyone if we make our communities that much more age friendly. I do think there are places in the world where there are lots of innovation where, dementia, like I think of some of the Scandinavian countries where there are more of embracing people's ability to engage in the society, even when they have dementia. So like that sort of idea of being respectful of people's agency to do something.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, and one of the things that I always did at the end of an interview with somebody, way back when I was a journalist, was to say, okay, is there anything else you want to say? So I'm going to give you each a chance to kind of put something forward before we kind of wrap this up. So is there anything you wanted to say you didn't get a chance to say because the moderator was too dumb to ask a good question? Let's start to my immediate, to my extent. Right. God.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that when we talk about aging well and functioning well, it's about ability and not disability. And so, and part of that experience, as we know from disability-related literature, is around the environment and like how much adaptation we can do. And so, if we know, for example, that as people get older, their eyesight changes such that small text is really hard to read. Well, why do we continue to have like the teeniest little font on like all the legal things that you're scrolling through all the time and all these documents and packaging and what else? So that there's ageism popping up right there. So it's a lot of it could be addressed through improvements in the environment that we all live in.
Linda?
I just want to add that don't judge a book by its cover, because a lot of the times you're going to be wrong.
All right, Denelda?
I would like people just to realize how much you've contributed in your lifetime and be encouraged to keep going and not let something just hold you back because of your age. I think that's one of the things that we really have to start standing up for ourselves and knowing who we are.
Janice?
Yeah, and I just to build on that, Janelle, I think it's about us having to believe in ourselves or to be confident in who we are, that we have agency, that we can make a difference, that we can aspire to other things. It doesn't mean that we're in a box, and so because we turn a certain age, then we should do X, right? And I just, I love the calling card, business card idea that Linda has. She's not going to say it, but it's a beautiful, it is a beautiful calling card.
Okay, go ahead, Linda. She called you out.
Well, we were talking about it before.
On the card, it says, I believe I can fly. And my question to you is, if I tell you I can fly, who are you to tell me I can't fly?
Indeed. All right. I'm not telling you you can't fly, Linda. No.
I wouldn't go there, Jean. We can get feisty.
Okay. Just a very quick, what's the one thing you hope people take from this conversation? Over to you.
Really, I hope people take away just the value that older adults contribute to our society, and it's on all of us to do the best that we can to combat ageism at all the different levels that we've been talking about.
Thanks, Melissa. All right, over to you, Fly Girl.
I would like everyone to leave here realizing that we all have value. From down here, 3 years old, to somebody who's 103. And that I feel it's our responsibility to get to know their value. And once we know our value, it makes a big difference. But it usually starts from us first. But we also have a responsibility, in my opinion, that I feel that we should be interjecting when people are not valuing other people. And we can do that lovingly. We can do that lovingly. But that's how we learn, when we see people doing things, or doing things perhaps that are not very good to do. But if somebody interjects lovingly and kindly, we learn something from that. And I feel that we have a responsibility to do that on a constant, sometimes we have to do it on a constant basis. When I see people respecting a little kid, don't do that just because they're a child, or being disrespectful to an older person because we can do things lovingly and get our point across, is what I want to say. I just want to leave that.
Donaldo?
I would like everybody to take away how important you are. You've lived a life, you've done a lot, and to continue on, because there's lots more to do when you're not alone.
Final word to you, Janice?
Wow, it's a hard act to follow.
That's why I left you for last.
Oh, thank you. How kind of you. I guess I had a thought, and then it went out of my head. Oh dear. It's around. I totally agree with everything that's been said about calling out in a gentle, lovingly way about ageism and valuing yourself. I think there's also a need to recognize the diversity within that population, so that people may have different levels of exposure to talks like this, or have different levels of education, to have different levels of income, that will all impact their capacity, that vision of what aging well means to them. So I just want us to acknowledge that there are a lot of diversity still within our communities.
And it's not usually the role of the moderator to add their 2 cents, but I'm going to do that.
We're going to give you permission.
Thank you. And I want to hearken to something Melissa said, because it's something my wife Kathryn says a lot, and that is about agency and giving yourself permission to be the best version of you, no matter how old you are or where you are at this particular stage of your life. And I think that's all really important. I think we've all kind of brought that to the table. Anyway, that's it for our part of the discussion, but we want to add your voices. So if you have a question, if you want to join our discussion, challenge anything you've heard this evening, please feel free to do so. And of course, you may have had some questions online, so I turn back over to Amy.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for that wonderful panel presentation. That was just really interesting and insightful. Appreciate that. So now, as Jean said, we're going to open it up and hear from our audience. I think first first let me remind the online audience of our email address. It's nsca@msvu.ca. Feel free to email in your questions. If we don't have time to get to all the email questions this evening, don't worry, because we're going to review them this week and we'll get back to you on that. And if you're in the audience and you have a question, you can just put your hand up, and one of our folks with the microphone will come to you so you can ask your question. I think first we'll throw open the mic and take some questions, and then we have some questions for you too, to get your thoughts on a few specific things. So first of all, anybody have a question? Oh, over here, yeah.
Just wait, the microphone's coming.
Just 1 sec. The mic's coming. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I found it very important that some of you commented on the value of being from a big family. And I'm 90 years old, and I'm from a family of 9. But the point is, my concern is today they have small families. We learned from each other, from our brothers and sisters and relatives. My concern is with these very small families, you will not have that same effect. And that feeling may not be as respectful as we were for our ancestors, our older people. So I can't change that, but I'm very much aware of that. So thank you, and I enjoyed hearing all your comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa, did you want to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that comment. So there's a couple of things that come to mind, but one is that there is some really interesting research that shows that people who go into geriatrics, so healthcare professionals who who end up working with older adults, one of the biggest determinants of that, or one of the things that leads people to that career, is having relationships throughout their life, say with grandparents or older people in their own families and their own lives. And so it is a great point that if we lose that, then we don't have this sort of empathy that's being built, these relationships, the valuing of people through your entire life that then leads to your careers. And then the other thing that came to mind was some of Janice's research that looks at caregiving. And we talked about how caregivers are often like older adults themselves and or children who themselves become older people when their parents are 100, but the families are getting smaller. And so this the caregivers within the family can be stretched.
Yeah, I just want to say a quick little story. Being from a family of 9, and my mom had dementia, and she had some cognitive impairment that moved along too. And there were two of us that lived off the island, but because there were 7 siblings who lived on the island, and there was 7 days a week, then every sibling had a day that they would come and care for my mom. And of course, like you have said, I come from a family of 9. I have 1 child, and it's a boy. And I bought him a kitchen set when he was 2 years old, thinking, I need to get him acclimatized to this. And one day he turned to me and he said, Mom, Grammy has like 9 kids, and you only have me. And I said, I know, it's going to be okay. He said, but when do I get to put you in a nursing home? Because he's just a little bit of a shit disturber. Yeah. Anyway, so I appreciate what you're saying, and I think even grandchildren's experiences are so very different. Like my son never knew my mother when she didn't have dementia, but her oldest, who would have been 30 years older, she'd give them the car. Like Grammy, if the parents wouldn't give them the car, down the road to Grammy's to get the car. So very different relationships is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, but really interesting question.
Another question? Down here. The microphone's coming to you.
Hi, I have a mom. She's 81, and I noticed when she turned 80, people started treating her really differently than when she was in her 70s. And my mom's super smart, and she talks just like I talk. But when doctors or shop people in the shop or other people talk down to her, she actually starts not talking the way she normally talks. She actually is responding in a way that's more, she's being treated like a child, and then sometimes she kind of acts just not like herself. And I'm just wondering, what is the effect of talking down to older people? I'm just afraid that the more she's talked down to, the more she'll just not act like the smart person she is.
That is such a fabulous comment, because we do see it all the time of people talking down, oh dear, oh my love, oh like sweetie, let me help you with this, without asking, do you need help? And I was hearing about some research recently where they actually did this. So they had participants in a study, and then they talked to half of them in a normal way. They think you would talk to an adult, and then they did cognitive testing and rated people's self-efficacy of how what they thought of themselves and their own abilities. And then they had a group that they talked down to and did that sort of like dearie, sweetie, like whatever. And they actually did worse on the memory and the cognitive testing, and they had worse views of their own abilities when they were being talked down to. So that's another thing that we should be checking, for sure.
Yeah, just a little story like with my mom, who was quite feisty. And then when she got sick, it was the way people talked to her. One of the things I would do if I went to an appointment and you talked to me, I would say, talk to her, because she was able to, well, of course, my mother would usually get in there before I could say that, but you'd have to say that. But I remember this one situation when she was in hospital, and I think she just got fed up. Anyways, this particular day, the nurse came in and said, how are we today? She said, I have no idea how you are, but I'm just fine. Right? And it stood out to me never to use the we. Right? Again, it's the individual.
I just want to add, even in nursing homes, and this is a challenge, we work a lot with administrators, et cetera, and there was I think he was a professor or maybe a physician, I don't know, but they would dress him in like sweatpants and like whatever was easier, and he was so depressed and so like becoming a challenge, having some behaviors that we would call our responsive behaviors. And then they realized that this man went to work every day in a suit. So they started dressing him in a suit, and it changed who he was, and so it's that, I think it's not only the verbal, it's also that sense of being too, I think is important.
Jean, I see we have an online question coming in.
So we have a question here. It says, it seems that Indigenous communities revere their elders. What can we learn and adopt from an elder supportive environment?
Who wants to tackle that? Oh.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think, again, I'm not an expert in this area at all, but I think I sort of hearken back to what was said about larger families, because my understanding of some of the Indigenous communities is that, you don't have to be a blood relative to be an auntie or, to be part of that unit. And so I think that sort of community cohesiveness, I think, can be really helpful in terms of, being able to recognize the wisdom, the contributions, and the learnings that we can acquire by listening to our elders, both Indigenous, but also within our own families. So,
Melissa?
Yeah, I agree. And again, not an expert, but I'm a listener. So I do so value the perspectives of different communities, including our Mi'kmaq communities here and other Indigenous communities that I've been working with across Turtle Island. And I find it personally inspiring. And actually, when I give talks, I often start it with a picture by Alan Sillaboy, who's a Mi'kmaq artist here, of grandmother and grandfather. And I find that it just sort of centers me in the value and respect that our cultures that we really need to listen to and learn from show for older people.
Anyone else? Over here.
Hi, I'm really glad that the topic of making the neighborhoods and the city in general, just making cities and neighborhoods in general safer and easier to get around. I'm a pedestrian, and there are some crosswalks in the city that I like to avoid because it's a little crazy. There just doesn't seem to be enough time to finish that cross before the light starts to go yellow. And I'm in pretty good shape, but it won't last. And I know, and I'm constantly thinking, how do young parents with young children get across here, especially in the winter where, you've got to deal with snow and ice. So I think we really need to look at a really concise, integrated plan for better neighborhoods and better public transportation and definitely better housing. And I also think it was great that the idea of communities making housing better for older people, people with dementia. I look at these dementia villages that are seeming to be really popular now in Europe. Why aren't we doing this here? Why is Canada like 20 years behind in so many innovative ideas? And I think we should
Janice.
be doing that.
Why aren't we? We do have a different social network system, but that's no excuse. I think what you're talking about is having those fundamental age-friendly aspects to your community: housing, transportation, good sidewalks, like accessibility generally, that will both help all ages of the community to be able to participate in community living. The Dementia Villages is a special, and Melissa, you may know more about them than I, but I know that they are definitely in some of the countries in Europe. There's some in British Columbia that are being tested, but they're at this moment they're not publicly funded. They're privately funded in Canada. So I don't know how that plays into what happens elsewhere. But good points. We are behind, and I think there's lots of policies and supportive action that we could be doing for sure.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind, these are great comments. Thank you for those comments. I totally agree. Is the importance of people's where they're coming from resource-wise. So you're just saying like the dementia villages, like if you live in BC close to a dementia village and you have like a lot of money, you may be able to go move into one, but they're not accessible to most people who would need them. So really, unfortunately, we come back to this issue around inequities and poverty being so important or so harmful. Another strategy that I have heard of some people doing here is getting together with a group of friends and saying, well, let's, when we downsize or whatever, let's, buy into or build together like a larger place that we could all live together and then each bring our strengths. And so as they age together, some of them will have certain strengths that they could bring and others can do other things. So that's people intentionally planning their older years, which is a really interesting model. And we'll probably be seeing more of that.
I think, do we have one more online question? But I think this may have to be our last question because we're running out of time. Okay.
This is not online, it's just from me.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I saw her hand go up.
So my question is about IT. IT is great, but can also be a divide. I'm finding as I deal with, in-laws who are aging, and neighbors who are aging, that they're coming to face with a lot of IT issues. Example, a lot of people have to now have an app on the phone, which means a smartphone, or when they log into anything, they have to do a two-step verification. In which it's sort of good, but it's also really hard to explain to someone who's been able to go to the bank for years and just pay their bills that very soon that won't be the case. So I would like a perspective on how we can better talk to, I guess, people about IT and how it is good, but also can be very, very, very intimidating for many people as they age.
Who wants a whack at that?
I'm going to get you later. No, it's a great question. And, IT stuff can be really, really complex, and it's always growing. And it can be really helpful, but it crosses that diversity of, can you even afford a smartphone, right? If you only, if you're on OSGIS with a little bit of CPP on the side, like really, some of the packages are horrendous. I do know that the libraries are quite supportive of people who have IT problems, but you have to come into the library. So that's the other sort of issue related to that. I don't have a solution, honestly. But I do think that we have to have a range, especially government public services, that we need a range of options where real people answer a phone and they help you to navigate where you need to go. And I think there are some groups that do that pretty well, like the Alzheimer Society, I think, is one that has a positive relate to that. But I think there's a lot more that needs to be done. So I don't have a very good answer to what should be done, other than to say it is a challenge. You can't book you can still phone the airline, but it's rarely. Try to find a phone call. Yeah.
There's where diversity comes in. And like I said, we moved into this co-op with a diverse group of people. Now, if I don't know what I'm doing on that app, knock, knock goes to the young woman that lives across the way, who's way younger than me and knows what she's doing on that. And I get help from that. And she'll come and knock on my door for things that she has no idea what to do about. So we help each other. I think it's just so important that we don't be in separated little villages. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I see, unfortunately, our time is up, so I want to just thank some people who participated in this evening for making it possible. I'm sure this conversation could have continued on for another hour. Really interesting questions and comments. I want to thank everyone participating in this very important and engaging discussion, and especially to our speakers who shared their passion and insight for these topics. And we appreciate the audience participation as well. Thank you especially to the Halifax Public Library for partnering on this event and hosting us here this evening. Thank you. For staff and students who helped with planning and on-site tonight. And of course, for the fabulous moderator and speakers helping to bring some awareness to this important topic. For those in the hall, you are invited to stay on for more chat and some refreshments. For our online participants, thank you for joining us. The live stream will be ended shortly. A recording of tonight's event will be available for viewing on the Center on Aging's YouTube channel in a day or so. Thank you again, everyone, and good night.